So here's the second portion of the final battle with Beowulf and the dragon. So even though the poem's filled with violent imagery, even for a poem thousands of years old, one of the more persistent themes is the desire for peace. Now, I think that's an important idea to write down. The hero, for example, only fights supernatural creatures, and other characters are harshly criticized for undue acts of aggression. So there's a certain underlying morality. The hero only fights supernatural threats, and the poem is highly critical of Unferth and others who violate that heroic code throughout the course of the poem. And I think that's significant. This stresses the need to avoid human conflict. Additionally, the bond between a lord and his men is highly valued, and people are portrayed at their best when they are generous to each other and celebrate their accomplishments. So notice there is a social sort of organization that's going on here, that the characters can only rise up to that ego level when they work together, and there's a certain sense of camaraderie that goes along with it. Thus, the poem itself, and this is a key idea, which is why I started with it, speaks against unnecessary fighting and murder, hoping to establish tranquility or peace in time of war. So that's a really good way to take a look at the way this develops. Now, further looking at this last battle, Beowulf's battle with the dragon is different from other previous encounters with Grendel and Grendel's mother. We got that. You should be able to track this and write about it on your exam coming up this week. This time he recruits men to aid him in the fight. That's a difference. He also brings the enslaved person to show him the way. Now, we don't have that necessarily in what we covered in class, but that thief that stole the golden cup, Beowulf grabs him, and he's a guide in this process. So I think that's important. We also know he goes through great lengths to replace his wooden shield with one made of iron. As it says, a marvelous all-iron shield from his smithy works. Quote directly from the text. Perhaps because Beowulf is older, he's wiser. Maybe. Maybe he realizes that he cannot take on fearsome monsters all by himself. Perhaps some of that wisdom that comes with age. It's also possible that the fire-breathing dragon is more formidable than anything that Beowulf has faced before. Sorry, my dog just walked into the room. But whatever the reason is, the poem's main message here is about loyalty and camaraderie. C-A-M-A-R-A-D-E-R-I-E. Camaraderie. Okay, close the door. In terms of Beowulf's last battle, a summary analysis, quick, reveals an unfortunate breakdown in the heroic code, or more specifically, the Brotherhood of Arms. Beowulf heroically charges in to attack the dragon, but his sword fails him. If you watch the previous video, that sword, Nagling, fails him in battle. It fails to penetrate the dragon's scales, which frightens his men and causes most of them to run away. Again, that sense of desertion that exists in the poem, just like the apostles deserted Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Now, that was also mentioned in the previous video. Beowulf swings his weapon with all of his legendary strength, causing the sword to break. Only Wiglaf, Beowulf's most loyal companion, remains and joins the fight. He weakens the dragon by stabbing it in its belly, and Beowulf is then able to cut it in half. And again, I think that's going to be significant. So, again, themes, in case you missed it before. The battle's significant because of the enormous supernatural power of the dragon and its ability to defeat the epic hero. The poem stresses that death comes to all, a theme for us, even those with extraordinary strength and valor. The heroic code, which we've talked about, is eroded when Beowulf's men abandon him. So first his sword fails, then his people do the same. So despite Beowulf's bravery as a soldier and generosity as a king, the bond between he and his men is broken when the men flee in terror. Likewise, almost in response to this, his own sword breaks in his hand. So if you're looking at the poem, this is a warning against cowardice and disloyalty. So the theme coming out of the battle with the dragon is this warning against disloyalty and cowardice. Such poor human attributes have disastrous consequences. Beowulf's death, however, also means the loss of a king. Without a strong leader and the establishment of a heroic code, culture fails, which makes Beowulf then a symbolic transition in culture and moving from one idea to another. At the end of the poem, Beowulf rebukes the fleeing men. So rebukes means he criticizes them rather harshly for their cowardice, and the poem predicts that war is looming over our nation. So there's a lot symbolically and literally happening here at the end of the text. Now, specifically, Beowulf's heroism, here at roughly 7 minutes in this video. Within the context of Beowulf versus the dragon, the poem also has a positive message, not just the end of culture as we know it. Beowulf is always the ultimate hero, even when he draws his last breath. Despite the fact he's a king and a much older man when the dragon arrives, Beowulf doesn't hesitate to fight. Even to save his own people, he goes into the battle by himself. He goes after the dragon alone, just like every man goes to death alone, just as he did when battling Grendel and Grendel's mother. So there's a connection, this idea that the hero has to fight alone. All of these traits of the main character are indicative of these hero characteristics. So if you don't have this written down in your notes, I strongly suggest this be something that you do right now. Beowulf is a noble figure who values honor above all else, establishment of cultural value. So, honor above all else, and his strength and courage back him up in the face of impossible tasks and odds, checking more of those boxes with the heroic characteristics. But something else worthwhile is that even when this code or this ideal of camaraderie breaks down and his men abandon him, Beowulf refuses to give up. He's still that ultimate hero. I think it's also important that the strength of the dragon doesn't defeat Beowulf. He's still able to, even though he's bitten and gushing blood, and I keep doing this, he's bitten in the neck and he's gushing blood, but he's still strong enough, rather dramatically, to take his dagger and slice the beast in half. Ultimately, Beowulf dies because of the poison from the bite. Again, the act is symbolic. With the lack of loyalty from his men, i.e., poison, the warrior culture is tainted. There's your theme. Poison equals the culture is tainted, which leads to sickness and death. There's a really important cultural value there. One last little segment of this. The heroic epic poem Beowulf is one of the oldest existing. The term is extant, E-X-T-A-N-T, extant manuscripts in English literature, and is the oldest poem of its kind in the English language. It reveals fascinating details about Anglo-Saxon culture and the beginnings of England's long literary legacy. Beowulf's battle with the dragon in particular is emblematic of all epic poetry. It's a symbol of all epic poetry, which means that when we start the Canterbury Tales on Tuesday and then pick it up Thursday after your test, this is going to make sense. It's emblematic of all epic poetry in that it features a hero with superhuman qualities who achieves greatness and honor through his deeds. In this case, Beowulf takes on a powerful adversary despite his old age and protected status as a king. He's noble and courageous, but has a tragic flaw. Great idea. Tragic flaw. Tragic flaw. And we're going to talk about that later, but I need that in your notes. Tragic flaw is called, ready? The tragic flaw is called the hamartia. Tragic flaw is called hamartia or hamartia. Hamartia. Tragic flaw. And for Beowulf, that's pride and overconfidence. Other literary heroes would borrow from this tradition, including those of Arthurian legend, Shakespeare plays, and even modern books and movies. Beowulf's lesson is therefore timeless. Greatness comes at a cost. Often it's what makes heroes legendary that ultimately brings them down. It's what makes heroes legendary that often brings them down.